Hello and welcome to Geek Warning, the podcast that puts the world's most interesting cycling tech into one place. I'm Dave Rome. We've got a rather full episode given that Tour de France, Eurobike, and all the custom bike shows seem to be happening right this week. Joining me to talk about it, Brad Copeland, mechanic to the stars. How are you doing?
I'm well. It's nice to be back, Dave. I've had a week to think about you since we last spoke.
Great. Well, I'm very glad you managed to take your dog on a holiday, so it looked marvelous, and welcome back. Also joining us, just briefly, Ronan Mc Laughlin. Ronan, I know it's very late there. I think you just told me you've done about a 13-hour workday, so we won't keep you long, but welcome.
No, I was saying I did 13 hours at work today before I sat down to start work.
Oh, so it's much longer.
Yeah, I'm at Eurobike, so that's just par for the course. Before we do jump in, though, that I have to say I was at the Tour de France there with Kaylee Fretz, or co-founder, editor-in-chief, or dear leader, and Johnny Long. And somehow name pronunciation came up at one point in the car. And I was explaining to the guys that after basically 4 years of working together, you still can't pronounce my name, which is kind of
I still can't pronounce your name. Do you want to say it correctly?
It's better than the German hotel receptionist attended tonight.
That's not a high bar.
Ronan Mc Laughlin was what he went for. So you're better than that, but yeah, we'll get you there.
McLaughlin?
See, you got the Laughlin, and then when you add in the Mac, it throws you somehow. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Never mind. I'm fine with it. I've been called worse.
Well, if you want things pronounced properly, don't hire an Australian. Yeah, so for this episode, we've got plenty to talk about, including stuff from Eurobike, new product releases. There's plenty of new drivetrains, it seems, including one from TRP and Classified. There's a cheap one from Microshift. There's another more budget-conscious one from SRAM. We've got a new hub that looks awesome. There's a new gravel bike, and there's quite a bit more. Before we jump in, just wanted to say that Escape Collective is member-funded, continues to be member-funded, and continues to need your support. For the month of the Tour de France, we have a lot of content, and to help everyone enjoy it, we have a special on at the moment where for this month, you can just get a membership for $1 for the month. So visit escapecollective.com/TDF to take up that special limited time offer.
We have a lot of content going up this month, like every hour or something. There seems to be an article published. I will say, if you're listening to this podcast, you're probably leaning more towards the tech side of our content. And there is actually like a bucket on the homepage that has all of our tech stuff that you can keep up to date with stuff that you may have missed had it disappeared off the latest news section. So check that out.
I'd say even ignoring the race in France, we seem to have about 2 tech articles a day at the moment. So plenty of opportunity to get your values worth out of a membership. And also, if you missed it, we had a bonus episode available for members of the Geek Warning podcast just this week past. So yes, plenty of opportunity to up your game, read some content, listen to some content. All right, let's dive in. Ronan, it's very late there, so I'm just going to start with the 2 things that you've written about on the site already, and also that you've had your hands on. So let's start with the first big one, which is Classified and TRP have collaborated on a group set. What's the story here?
Yeah, they have. I mean, listeners, I'm sure, are aware of the Classified PowerShift 2-speed hub that we've talked about quite a bit on this podcast. Dave, you had a full in-depth review of that system. One of the things that we both agreed on throughout that was that until Classified had some sort of integration with shifters and a group set, that was one of the major limitations. And
at least shifters.
At least shifters. And that's effectively what they've got now. They have partnered with TRP, and TRP have developed a new group set, and TRP have included the Classified PowerShift as a sort of key component within that group set. So the group set it's called the ViStar / PowerShift. It's 1x only, and it's 1x only because you're effectively getting your 2x system from Classified's PowerShift rear hub. So what that means is there's no longer the satellite shifter for the Classified system on the handlebars. It's now integrated into the levers that TRP have produced. On top of that, you've got what I guess, as you'd expect at this point, a 12-speed cassette. But rather confusingly, It's not, the ViStar group set isn't described in any of the content that we got supplied as a 12-speed or a 1x12.
It was not. No.
No, it was rather short on details, but they said it was a 1x15 or a 1x14, depending if you went for road
1x15 or 1x16, wasn't it?
Sorry, yes,
16.
1x15 or 1x16, depending if you went for gravel or road. And that's because they have also included what they're calling quantum shift, which is kind of like Shimano synchro shifter. It's effectively sequential shifting, where you just use the shifters on your right hand lever to move either up or down the block, and the sequential shifting system basically uses, what it does with Shimano and SRAM is it shifts the front derailleur to match whatever shift you're doing on the rear derailleur. And because the new TRP and classified group set doesn't have a front derailleur, what that system effectively does is shifts the internal planetary gear 2-speed hub in line with whatever shifting you're actuating with your
in
hands.
order to retain the next most similar gear step. So that's why technically there's 24 gears in this system, but really there's only 15 or 16 unique gears depending on the cassette ratios you use.
Which is the same. I mean, if you have a 2x at the front and a 12-speed at the rear, you haven't got 24 individual gears. You've got some overlapping there. And so that's where the 15 comes from. I didn't quite confirm yet why it's 15 and 16. I think it's how it works out given the cassette ratios and how many unique gears there are based on, one of those cassettes would have more overlap in terms of overlapping with the rear hub. So I think it's as simple as that one has more unique gear steps. The key difference is with the Shimano and SRAM sequential shifting, there is a delay. There's a front derailleur shift that you may or may not be anticipating, which I've never quite got myself comfortable with, and as such never use those systems.
Correct.
But on top of that, there's actually the electronic shifting front and rear derailleur can't do the two at the same time, and so there's a slight delay. But actually with TRP and classified, their shift of the classified power shift hub and the TRP rear derailleur are instant and simultaneous, and so there is no delay.
Gotcha.
And so what it actually looks like, I jumped on a TRP group set equipped bike that was on a Wahoo roller trainer at Eurobike today and started shifting through the block. And what it actually looks like is as you're shifting up through the block, whenever the power shift hub engages, you get actually a rear derailleur shift in the opposite direction from what you were anticipating. And actually, if you don't look at it, you don't recognize that's happened, or you don't feel that has happened. You just feel another shift in whichever up or down, whichever direction you were forcing the system to shift.
Yeah. So I guess some other things with this group set is they've introduced their own crank to match it from TRP. Two cranks. It's using, they've licensed MRP's narrow wide tooth profile, which is quite a well-proven tooth profile. They've matched it with KMC chains. The cassette is Classified's own. There's no changes there versus the 12-speed cassettes previously offered, which are proprietary to their hub.
There are some new TRP cassettes that will... Oh. Yeah, that are an option. Yes, there are some new... details on that. It was a classified stand that I first stumbled upon. I didn't get time today to go buy the TRP stand, but details on what exactly the differences are between the cassettes. There are either no differences or there are a lot of differences, because classified weren't exactly they weren't exactly clear on what the differences are.
Right.
But I think functionally there will be no difference.
Sure.
But TRP are introducing some new cassette options with this new group set that will obviously be compatible with the power shift hub.
Yep. The rear derailleur is wireless with a removable battery.
There's also two rear derailleurs. I'll keep interrupting.
Oh, okay. Please do.
There is one road and there is one gravel. The gravel is obviously longer
cage. Yep. And the architecture looks pretty traditional in terms of having adjustments and all that. And I mean, there's some questions still remain. We don't know pricing.
No pricing set yet.
We don't have a clear idea on battery longevity, although we do know with Classified the battery. So, and I think TRP is claiming they've matched it.
Yeah, so Classified always claimed 10,000 shifts. TRP are claiming the same now, which is either well matched up or very coincidental. I'm not sure yet.
Yeah,
only
and
testing will
I
tell.
think what's not really mentioned anywhere is that they haven't the design of the classified system has the battery in the through axle handle, which means they can't necessarily connect the two, so they're still running independent batteries. Is that your understanding
the TRP,
of it?
So TRP are using their command wireless protocol for shifters in the derailleur, and the battery is very similar to SRAM Axis battery. It's obviously not the same, but in form wise, it looks pretty similar. So just clips on the rear side of the derailleur, just the same way as an Axis battery would. And again, claimed 10,000 shift battery life.
Yep. And then
how many times how long would it take me to do 10,000 shifts? I don't know.
For you, one ride probably, but 1 24-hour ride, which is just a Tuesday for you. But I think this looks really interesting. I think you've had your hands on it, Ronan, but I think some questions still remain. You haven't actually gone anywhere. I think TRP, it's Tektro Racing Products. It's the Tektro division of company, so they're kind of braking specialists. So I think the brakes are probably going to be pretty good to start with. But yeah, I mean, ergonomics are sort of a question mark from the photos, and whether shifting only from the right hand shifter is the best way, I think, is another question mark.
That's another thing. It's, we have to sort of determine, will there be an option to adjust which shifter buttons perform which functions? Don't know that yet. It is worth just saying that while quantum shift is the way it was set up today, it's probably the way it's intended to be used. There is still, even with quantum shift engaged, the left-hand shifter does have shifters on it and can be used at any time as like a bailout. Regardless of what gear you're in, you can shift the power shift hub like you would do with a front derailleur. Furthermore, either holding in one of the left-hand shifters for 5 seconds will either activate or deactivate quantum shift, depending on what setting you have it in. And so you can go back to using it more like a traditional 2x.
All right. Well, I guess before we move on, Ronan, do you like it? Too early to tell.
Too early to tell. I mean, certainly, as you might expect, when you're shifting through your cassette, you're shifting up through the cassette, and all of a sudden it decides it wants to go back down the cassette. That's not exactly as smooth. That's not Shimano smooth shifting from the experience I had today. Now, I was riding on a trainer, not exactly representative of how it might feel outdoors, I don't think. But I was pleasantly surprised with it today. The form and the ergonomics felt, again, sitting on a trainer, all those caveats applied. Pretty happy with how it felt in my hands. There's a lot of talk online about, well, it seems to be splitting opinion, in that some hate the look of it, some think it looks quite neat, some are surprised that such a new product looks so neat. And I think what it's worth remembering here is that TRP have 30 years of experience in building bike components, and this is effectively a TRP group set. It's not a classified group set, and classified, we're sort of keen to reiterate that they have an open integration policy, air quotation marks there, meaning that if Shimano or SRAM or someone else, L2
classified are not ready to go steady or exclusive, is what they're saying.
Yes, exactly. Yes, exactly. But yeah, I think that's worth remembering, is that this is a TRP group set, and as such, I mean, some of the TRP mountain bike stuff is among the sweetest looking stuff you'll find. So I wasn't surprised that it's such a well finished looking product.
For sure. And I think it's worth mentioning that the one universal truth in life is that people are always going to complain about the aesthetics of a new group set.
A new anything. Not just group sets, I think.
That's true. Yeah. Anyway. All right. Well, head to the website to see what this stuff looks like. And I mean, it's probably worth reiterating that the PowerShift hub itself is unchanged from when we last reviewed it. We do have a full review of that. Although some of our complaints. Some hints that some updates are in the works. Oh, cool. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
10 tooth cogs potentially. Nothing confirmed. I was sort of asking questions and judging by responses, but some responses were more positive than others.
Okay. All right. Ronan, also new from you, also something you've covered. DT Swiss side, and Continental have put their hands together and I guess let their powers combine and have created the Aero 111 tyre.
It's kind of funny that Movistar, the team famous for having a trident of leaders at the Tour de France, were sponsored by Continental and still are, I think, although in one of my galleries from the Tour last week, you'll notice that some of their tyres were blacked out, some were not. And they were all from Continental, so I don't know what's going on there. But yeah, the trident of brands and manufacturers and industry experts, DT, Swisside, and Continental, have finally unveiled the aero tire that JP Ballard had teased on my Performance Process podcast earlier this year.
Right.
And yeah, it's an aerodynamic road tire for your front wheel only.
Okay.
Although you could use it on the rear.
Yeah.
JP
It's just the
Ballard
benefits.
don't bother
limited.
because you'd be wasting your money.
Gotcha. Okay. So yeah, I mean, it's like it's very Continental in its approach. It's using familiar rubber compounds. It comes with claims of very competitive rolling resistance. In what was it? Somewhere between their time trial tire and everyday 5000.
Yeah, I think the claim was that it's slightly faster rolling than the GP 5000 STR. But not quite as fast rolling as the GP 5000 TT TR, which is technically speaking a time trial tire, as the name suggests. But from what I understand, Ineos used the TT tire for the entire Tour de France last year across all 8 riders and didn't have a single puncture. So it's not exactly a time trial tire either.
Your results may vary.
Yes, they definitely will. I know people who have cut and punctured those tires on the very first ride. So
yeah. Okay. Well, yeah, it looks really interesting. I think it's worth mentioning that they're not really achieving the aerodynamics through silly things like making it a peaked or cone-shaped tire or something, like that. It's a very normal tire, and I guess what's the 30-second explainer on how they make and on what makes it aero?
Yes, there are 48 cavities or scallops or cutouts, however you want to call them. Continental refer to them as vortex generators. They're sort of dotted either side of the tread cap, and the idea is that these 48 cutouts dotted either side of the tread cap, and what the 3 brands are claiming is that they act as vortex generators. They effectively turn the flow over the tire turbulent, and in doing so help it to stick to the rim profile better, and as such get a smoother, more aerodynamic setup, a smoother flow over the entire system, which results in reduced drag. Now, it's not only, I think when we say aero, we think faster. And while this tire, Continental, did provide some aero testing graphs that suggest it is faster, the other side of this is, at least what they're trying to tell us, is that there's like an aero stability component to this. And so in crosswind conditions, if you get to those higher yaw angles, say above +10 or beyond -10 degrees of yaw, then current tires and wheel sets, you get this stall effect, and in choppy or blustery or crosswind conditions, that sort of translates into more difficult or more unpredictable steering. We've all felt that sensation where suddenly a gust of wind just grabs your front wheel, throws you across the road or whatever. And what Continental are saying is that because this is actually the further out into the yaw sweep you get, the more effective the benefits of this new aero tire are, and so you get more predictable, more comfortable handling. When you do get a gust, the torque applied to your wheel is again more linear, more predictable, and as such you don't get those big steering moments that just sort of catch you off guard. I haven't tested it yet. I can't say whether that is true or not, but certainly looking at the graphs that they presented, the aero tire does look like it's faster in those lower yaw angle conditions, which is, I mean, if you're thinking aerodynamics, you're probably a rider who is in those sorts of conditions more often, because the faster you go, the lower your effective yaw angle gets. And it is marginally faster in those yaw angles, say from +10 to -10. But on the graphs, it's clearly visible where this tire comes into its own are at the outer reaches of the yaw sweep that they've done. So anywhere from +12 to +20 degrees or -12 to -20. And you can just see this huge increase in drag on their standard GP 5000 STR tire, while the Aero 111 tire, the drag is still dropping off. And that's they're saying that's because you're effectively picking up the sail effect, and even getting some like negative drag where, the wheel system then is, they're saying, working like a sail. And so like, I mean, it's a little bit questionable in that if you're at 45 kilometers per hour, are you ever going to see minus 20 degrees of yaw angle? I mean, can you do 45 kilometers per hour if you're getting a wind strong enough to still see minus 20? I don't know. But what Continental are saying is that actually the gains are there even at lower speeds, and even on shallower rims and endurance type rims that DT Swiss make, that the benefits are there for regardless of you're going fast, slow, and regardless of your rim profile.
Yeah, very cool. Well, you wrote a whole bunch about it, so if what Ronan just said isn't enough for you, please head to the website.
I wrote a whole bunch about it on a flight yesterday. It turns out actually while I was writing that, I later found out that the person sitting in front of me in the flight was actually a Continental employee. So that was kind of coincidental.
And he was like, this guy keeps kicking my seat and like tapping away on this computer.
But that was also when I was much less fatigued. So I was probably making more sense in that article as well. So if you want to know more details, pick that up.
Ronan, I'm going to let you go. It's very late there.
Thanks,
you
guys.
seem to, I would say go to bed, but I think you're going to just go straight back to work. So good luck.
I am, yeah.
All right. Good to see you. All right. Well, now that Ronan's gone, we can talk about mountain bike things.
Okay.
So, SRAM, they have released yet another group set. This one's a little bit different to the regular in that you probably won't be able to buy it unless you're buying a complete bike, because I think it's OE only. But the SRAM S1000 group set. Yeah, I mean, what are some details of this that you've seen?
So this is basically an Eagle transmission group for OEM only bikes, so complete bikes that you would buy in a bike shop, presumably, or from a few mail order sources that exist. It is basically T-type or transmission type parts, including sort of replace your UDH hanger with the derailleur. The only sort of one of the more unique aspects of it is that it does not use an XD driver for the cassette, and it mounts on an HG or what's kind of a traditional Shimano type freehub body. And
yet they still managed to retain the 10-tooth cog.
Right, exactly. So I'm very interested to see exactly how that works.
Yeah.
And what they've had to do to make that possible. But yes,
so looking at it, it looks like that 10-tooth is connected with all the cogs up to like an 18-tooth, and then that component is individually replaceable.
Yeah.
Separate from the rest of the cassette. So I'm assuming that 10-tooth cog is probably like over, like mounted to like the cog next to it, the 11-tooth, and
kind of like
it doesn't necessarily.
Small cog where it keys into the next one.
Yeah, and that is not necessarily fully supported by the freehub body. It's just supported by the cog next to it. So, or by the lock ring is the other option. So,
right.
I mean that's quite interesting. I mean they'll have to offer that cassette aftermarket if they're speccing it on bikes.
I guess it should be said. This is sort of a budget friendly group. I don't know if we really actually stated that. It's OEM only, and it's sort of like low end. It's like lower end than GX is now.
Yeah, it's very similar to GX, but they've like cheapened the crank. They seem to have put a new clutch mechanism into the derailleur, which I assume would save some money as well. I mean it's just a slightly more basic finish on the derailleur. So it's all about saving cents on the dollar. I assume it's at the OE level, and
still access,
price down a bit.
Still wireless, electronic, nothing different about.
Still
sort of
all cross compatible with
yes.
better stuff as well. Yeah, but
guess we'll see. I'm sure we'll see plenty of it soon.
Yeah, have you had much experience with the GX stuff, the GX transmission?
I have a little bit of it. Yeah, I've seen a few groups. Seem very solid.
Positive.
Yeah, I would say generally
experiences.
Generally positive. I kind of say it, GX is sort of, and has been, in previous iterations of SRAM products, kind of the bare minimum that I would really recommend to anybody who is seriously approaching riding their bike beyond,
Agreed.
Around town. The SX and NX stuff is, I kind of wish it just didn't even really exist, because I feel like it kind of undermines the whole point
It
of
does.
everything. It's like trying to make something that costs $500 cost $5 and then see how good it can be, you know? So that's just a little side note there. But that being said, this does look
SX
solid.
stuff is pretty awful.
Yeah. It's like so plasticky that it like wears itself out, you know, like the
on the shop
pivots,
floor.
Yeah, like it's just sitting there. Like the pivots of the rederailleur parallelogram and like the kind of whatever bushing kind of connection points get so sloppy so fast that it's like a bad experience waiting to happen. So I would avoid that to anyone out there listening. But curious to see how this group doesn't appear to be quite like cheapened in the way that, for example, that SX group we just discussed is. Yeah. And so I'm hopeful that this is like kind of budget friendly, but still serviceable, you know, in the sense of like not working on it, but like to the rider, it's a good quality group. So fingers crossed. Kind of curious about the cassette. I wonder how and if that would be compatible with any previous 12-speed groups. They have had the 12-speed HG cassette in the past as well for the previous version of axis groups and mechanical groups too. So not sure. I mean, the one sort of curiosity was that it did not have a 10-tooth, but had an 11-tooth cassette.
Yeah.
Depending how much you think about B gaps and B settings on derailleurs, it's kind of curious that if you reference the large cog, that it wouldn't somehow be slightly affecting the position to that smallest cog relative to a 10 because the adjustment's the same, but the cog sizes are different. So I've always wondered about that. So maybe this is good to keep the ratio.
But does require a different
range.
Chain and all that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so I assume it probably wouldn't be backwards compatible, just like they say the regular transmission stuff isn't. So anyway, but either way, curious to see it in real life. It's kind of caught me off guard with that one. I didn't know that was even coming, and then here it was.
Yeah, for sure. Agreed. Also, speaking of budget things, Microshift, they have yet another version out of the Sword group set, which is kind of their gravel group set. So it's full mechanical. You need a mechanical rim brake or disc brake of a road variant to use it. But yeah, original Sword was 10-speed and very well priced. And they've come out with one that's even better priced, which is now 9-speed. Looks, I mean, I guess it's kind of like Microshift Advent versus Advent X, if you're familiar with the drop bar range. If you're familiar with the mountain bike range of Microshift. But yeah, I mean, this is at the real low end of the scale. So, you know, we're talking like that sort of well below like a SRAM Apex price point. You know, it's probably, significantly cheaper than that again. So, yeah.
Have you ridden much Microshift, Dave?
I haven't ridden the latest Sword stuff. I did spend quite a bit of time testing the Advent X at the old place and came away pretty impressed with the functionality of it. Really hated the shifter ergonomics. Found them an actual pain.
Mm-hmm.
But in a flat bar configuration with that shifter, it was actually quite cool. And then Sword aimed to fix my complaints over ergonomics of the shifter. So I think there's some cool features here, like, you know, clutch equipped derailleur with serviceable derailleur with like a quality shifter and like real fuss free, you know, like low speed count, so it's not as sensitive to adjustment. And the cassettes aren't too heavy and you provide your own chain and all that. I think there's some cool things here for what it costs.
Yeah, Microshift stuff is like dirt cheap compared to everything else. Like it's shockingly cheap and it works really, really well. It's not like something I'm likely to be speccing on my next bike necessarily. You know, if you're someone of some style and taste and certain kind of quality level requirements, it's probably not the brand for you. But if you're really just kind of looking to get something together that works pretty much flawlessly, not a lot of frills, it's not fancy, it doesn't necessarily blow you away with anything. It's somewhat iterative technology that is just cheaper than anything else by a long shot, but man, it does really work. Really works well. Yeah. And I mean, just compared to what everything else costs, I mean, nothing comes close to how well it works. So
I've taken someone's SRAM SX off to upgrade them to an even lower cost Microshift Advent, and they've been stoked.
Exactly. So, I was going to say. So that was exactly where I was going. It was like we just talked about this other SRAM group. No offense, SRAM, but the Microshift stuff is like not only does it work better, and it like setup is easier. but it's like it lasts longer and is way less sensitive to literally everything, which the SX group seems to falter when
for sure.
Taken outside.
So yeah, I mean it's cheap stuff, and I'm not the customer for looking to buy a bike that comes with this stuff, but I wouldn't be afraid to advise someone to buy a Microshift equipped bike. If they're looking at the low end and they had a choice, between a SRAM SX bike and a Microshift Advent, I would be pointing them towards the Microshift. That conversation gets a little bit more confusing with new Shimano Q's stuff, which seems to be really good. But yeah, I think it just comes back to price point, and I think Microshift is doing a pretty impressive job in the market for some of this stuff. So.
And cassette range is also, I think, the largest 9-speed cassette range offered, which
pretty big.
Yeah, I think it was like 48. Was 48? I can't actually need to refer back to my.
Yeah, I think the 10 speed's 1148.
Yeah, so that's what I recall. I'm actually looking it up to just 1146 for the 9-speed, or an 1142 for the 9-speed. So you have some options.
Yeah, it's pretty generous. Yeah.
But yeah, not bad for 9-speed. It's
for sure.
Hopefully the steps aren't massive, but I think for someone into the market, they're not going to complain too much about that.
Yep. So yeah, 1x and 2x configurations available. Yeah, if you're in the market for some proper budget group sets, do check it out. Brad, can we talk a bit about your favorite topic, chain waxing?
Sure, why not? It wouldn't be an episode without it.
Yeah, didn't you want to rename the podcast to the weekly discussion of mid-level gravel options and chain waxing?
Well, I'm just sort of on aggregate. That's a lot of what we do here, Dave. So the future is wide open, but we can still hit these hot topics whenever we have a chance. And I think we have one.
I like it. Hot topic indeed.
Yeah.
So, chain waxing, with the tour on, we've seen quite a few teams kind of come out and say that they're now on Team Chain Wax, and one of them is Little Trek, who is sponsored by Cyclowax. And Cyclowax has been busy with, I'm going to call them trinkets at this time, because it's the sort of thing that gets the media all buzzing about fancy new things that are very obviously new and quite topical. And one of them is an on-bike waxing station. So it looks like kind of like a smart trainer in a sense, where you sit the rear wheel on and then this device clamps over the chain, and it's basically rotating the chain by itself through the machine. It's a prototype, so I won't be too harsh on it. There's no word on pricing. The fact that it takes 30 minutes to do the chain, I'm thinking you've got a team of quite a few riders in the team. Plus, if it's rained that day, they're going to want to do the spare bikes that had sat on the roof as well. There's probably not enough hours in the day for this machine to get through the team.
Well, it's like we said last time. I think for a team with the budget of a Lidl Trek or any of these big boys, my hope is that they would pre-wax these chains. It kind of undermines the intent of this object you're describing. But to me, that would be the obvious approach, would be to have the chains ready to go and not wait and do it all the afternoon before you have to pack it up, transfer to the next day and all that stuff. Because like you say, at that point, there really isn't time. I'm sure the sponsor would like to have that product showcased in their staging area or whatever, but
just sit the one spare bike on it.
I'd be shocked if they were really running that for every bike every day.
Yeah. So they're not. They've also got 2 ultrasonic cleaners set up for waxing. So it's a 2-stage process for them. It sounds like they've got the first ultrasonic is a basic wax, which is kind of just being used to flush out the day's wax, and then they dip it into the race proven wax, which is kind of the one with all the low friction additives. And then it looks like they've got another machine, which I've seen photos of, which looks to bed in the chain. So it's kind of like this. I don't know whether it was hand cycle or not, but it's got like this quick release pulley, cog system that just lets you quickly put the chain in place and quickly tension it, and then just run it in. So you're breaking up all the wax, and that actually looked pretty cool, pretty space efficient. That would be a very time efficient way of dialing in those 10 plus chains every day. And I'm sure they've got pre-wax chains sitting ready to go as well. So, but yeah, I mean, all the time not gluing tubulars these days can now be spent
gotta fill the day.
dialing in those chains.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I don't know. I think that's cool. I think the on-bike waxing machine, I think one, they've taken inspiration from an April Fool's joke I did a few years ago where I went through the process of whole bike waxing, which saved you from having to take off your chain.
Oh, good.
The photos involved an aquarium heater and a giant bin and all the packets of wax that I could find. And some people thought it was very funny. Others got very angry that I would suggest being so wasteful with wax. And that they I did suggest taking the rear wheel off so you don't get it on your brake rotor. It wasn't that silly. Yeah. April Fool's is tough because, time zones and all.
True. Yeah. So this guy, he's really gone off the deep end down there.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, so anyway, so I feel like I'm an inventor in the space.
Yeah, I was going to say maybe they're taking some cues from our podcast too, where we lamented sort of number one gripe of people waxing their chains all the time is putting it back on wrong. So if you can assume that it's on right in the first place, and this eliminates that possibility. So hey, there's one check in the positive column right there, right off the bat.
It does. But yeah, I think for me, looking at the system, this on-bike wax system, I don't see it taking off because it looks like it will be expensive and it takes quite a lot of space. I don't really see it being used for more than like a very select few wealthy plus maybe a pro team or two that get given this thing. I think it just takes too much space, and the cost of it, like the number of drivetrains you'll be able to buy instead of this would be.
Have you actually seen it in use? Like being used?
No, I've only seen still photos of it.
I want to see what the rest of the bike looks like after 30 minutes of this, because would there not just be stuff all over the place? Really, like wax?
No, it seems.
There's a squeegee.
It seems really. It seems really slow, which is why it takes 30 minutes. So it seems like it's slow enough that the chain the wax bond needs to be broken up. Like the chain kind of comes out hard. So yeah, I mean it's running. It's not going quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
I'll
anyway,
wait for a time lapse video. I don't have 30 minutes to watch this whole thing happen, but I can watch like 15 seconds. Yeah. For
sure. But yeah, I guess the bigger picture, the chain wax trend seems to be hitting the world tour in a big way. We've seen Visma Lisa bike already on it. I've heard EF already moving to it as well, and now Little Trek with an official sponsorship. I think Visma is not officially sponsored by the wax company that they're using, so they're going against sponsorship. But yeah, I think it's interesting. I think it'll be interesting to see where teams figure out the efficiencies from a mechanics point of view and how to do all this. Because I mean, it is, one rainy day and you've got to do the bikes that weren't even used that sat on the roof. So there's complications here, but food for thought. Last in the big news is there's been a huge number of bike shows as of late, specifically handmade style bike shows. So there was Bespoke out of Manchester in the UK. Envy had their Grodio Envy Road Show, I think they call it. There was Made, the US event. They had an Australian edition, which I attended. Eurobike as well seems to be getting in the handmade scene with quite a few brands using handmade builders to showcase their components. So there's a lot going on and a lot of attention given to the small builders, which I think's really cool. I'm basically bringing this up to self-plug that I have galleries from Made Australia. A couple of weeks ago we had Spoken, the Handmade Bike Show Australia, and this is the second event in Australia. There's plenty to see. A few bikes with gearboxes, more titanium than you can imagine, really cool paints, some quite nice innovative things, but most importantly, some really clean bikes as well. And I'd say if you're of the opinion that things like internal cable routing are silly, or you don't like the trend of disposable bicycles, then this is the category you should be paying attention to.
Yeah, it's nice to see titanium getting a second chance now that it's so 3D printable. All these bikes have some random elements like dropouts and kind of small hardware bits that are 3D printed now, and they both look quite cool, usually, sometimes. But it also is kind of a unique manufacturing process that in the first time we all got to enjoy titanium bikes didn't really exist. And so it's kind of allowed for some creative interpretations of the material, which in my opinion is always a lovely material for a bicycle frame.
Some cool interpretation, and it also is helping some of these builders be competitive to the latest carbon bikes in terms of like fitting wide tires in with chainring clearance, like by using 3D printed parts in that small area, using a printed yoke instead of, pinching a tube and structurally damaging it. There's some cool solutions, and or like having a dropout and then like the flat mount interface. I know your favorite brake interface, Brad. So
there we go. Here's the topic.
Yeah, so I think there's definitely some cool things going on here, and allowing custom geometry with some of these prints.
Yeah, I was going to say the customizability. That's a cool feature. I imagine too, it's quite cheap relative to in the titanium 1.0 days, when most of those parts you described were like machined from plates of titanium, which I imagine the tooling for that is astronomically expensive to be able to work with the material to those tolerances. Tie's pretty hard to machine. So there's like blocks of, solid titanium being cut down to make, either a chainstay bridge, yoke area, or dropouts or whatever. So I think it's also making that material and the cost of frames maybe marginally less expensive, but potentially it's less expensive.
Potentially. I mean, you're paying per the gram rather than for the time, if that makes sense. So. But it is still an expensive material, but it is opening up a world of rapid manufacturing, I guess, or one-off manufacturing. One example, probably my favorite part of the trip to Melbourne for the Made show was I actually managed to do a little factory tour with Prova, which I'll have a gallery of in the coming few weeks. But that was really cool to see their process of how they go from like taking on a customer order and doing it in like 2D CAD as far as like dialing in the geometry, and then taking it into like a parametric 3D CAD after that, and how they design the frames. And like, it was definitely for the bike nerds. They're one of the first builders to use parametric CAD, which is sort of I guess in a layman's term is you change one dimension, it automatically adjusts for the others. So if you change the geometry, it's automatically adjusting the design around that geometry for you. So you're not having to necessarily redraw it from scratch. That's something that a few other builders have started to use, but it's still in the advanced end of things, and being shown that in CAD and how it how they can influence 3D print design and all that as they change little things like the seat stay position or the seat stay diameter, and how that adapts to the rest of the bike was pretty cool for this bike nerd to see. So I'm very keen to share that gallery. All right, Brad, did you have anything on your mind, or perhaps a PSA?
I'll do my PSA, and then I'll tell you about my other idea maybe for another one, Dave.
Okay. All right.
I've got to workshop this a little bit. This is, I don't know if I want to share this secret because it's so good. But I'll tell you this in the meantime. So today, this was something I had not actually seen on an alloy rim before, although I showed it to one of my longtime friends, Mr. Greg Thomas. His name comes up once in a while. He's like my close confidant when it comes to bicycle nonsense, besides you, Dave, of course. But he's been a part of my life for a long time, a little longer than you, so he gets some precedent here and there.
Fair.
And he claims to have seen it a number of times, so but he's seen everything. So anyway, customer brought a bike in. They were still riding it. Tire was still mounted and inflated, but it was no longer rideable because the rim width had spontaneously grown in width due to the fact that the brake track, this is a rim brake equipped like touring/commuting bike, nothing fancy, but had been ridden in such a state of neglect. I mean, the pads were totally smoked, and it was like probably ridden metal on metal for, an extended period of time. But removed enough material that then the pressure from within, from the inflated tire, actually caused the entire sidewall of the rim, like brake track, to blow out, which I've seen done on carbon rims a number of times from overheating them on descents, softening up the epoxies and resins and so forth in the carbon material, and then the pressure blows out from there. But on an aluminum one, it was pretty incredibly uniform. It was kind of amazing because it only blew out to the extent that the rim was not supported within from like the rim bed, the kind of box section of the rim, but just the upper bit of the bead where the tire and rim interface with one another. Heated it up so much.
It was just like kinked out the whole way around the circumference of the rim.
Out, I would say.
Yeah.
It was the technical term. It was kinked all the way out. And I actually saved it just because I don't know what I'm going to do with that. I just want to show some people because it's almost like looked on purpose, like you roll fenders on like a custom, car type thing. It was like so perfect. But
yeah,
anyway.
I mean, I've definitely seen rim wear cause tire blowouts on aluminium rims.
Yes.
But I don't think I've ever seen one as uniform as the one you sent me. Normally there's like a little bit of the rim like, pops out.
Yeah, sure, like a little deformation or something. But no, this was like clearly had been going on for a while before it made its way into the shop.
Just a work of art.
Yeah, it was, like I said, I've seen a lot of stuff, and this one really stopped me in my tracks. Kind of brightened my day in a way because it was so unbelievable.
Stopped you in your brake tracks.
Oh God, stop me! Stop you! I would say the relevant takeaway from this, besides the obvious, is if you're riding and you see this happening, it's way too late for you. But disc brake rotors also have a minimum thickness. Usually it's written right on the rotor. Can be hard to measure sometimes because sometimes the sort of middle of the brake track, the center kind of your pad might wear thinner than at the top edge, the outside diameter of the rotor, just because of how and where the pad sits. You need a caliper with kind of the ability to measure a little pinch on the inside.
A pinpoint area rather than a flat surface.
But it's, we're talking fractions of millimeters that are, determined in or out of tolerance. And the effect of that beyond the manufacturer's stated minimums is that you can sometimes get uneven lever feeling that you can't make go away no matter how well you've bled or how new your pads or whatever the case. Typically the front rotor is likely to be worn more just because it usually does the lion's share of braking. That's not necessarily true for everybody, and rotor sizes, if they're different, can also, affect that. But it's worth checking. I feel like it's underdone, replaced, at least not on the frequency. And of course, the consequences are not as obvious as this silly rim from my day today. But check that. Do check that.
Yeah. So the same tools you'd use for measuring rim thickness typically apply to measuring rotor thickness. So you can get a thing called a thickness gauge, which has like these little pinpoints. In the cycling world, Ice Tools actually makes one, which was originally sold as a rim thickness checker and is now sold as a disc brake thickness checker.
Yes.
But
same
you
product.
can get them, same products. You can also get them from other brands that are not cycling related. A micrometer is what I use for disc rotors, just because it's a handy tool to measure things precisely, and it is perfect for measuring disc rotors. Or for like $5, and you can just hope that you get one that actually works. There's a thing called an Iwanson gauge, which is in theory like a old school dentistry tool for measuring like molars, I believe is what it was used for. And it's like $5 and it does the same thing and it works just like a thickness gauge. But I have heard from people that theirs was like 0.5 of a mil off because it's so cheap that and when you're trying to get within
0.1, then it's like
when the tolerance is 0.1, 0.5 is a problem. So it may be
over replaced, not under replaced. So it's okay.
Yeah. So I've got one of those. The sample I've got seems close enough, but hearing other people say theirs are not even close, I'd probably say it's a precision cost. So maybe spend a little bit more and get a thickness gauge or a micrometer and measure rotors.
I would say maybe too the modern example of this rim blowout, it would be sort of when someone is running like Shimano Ice Tech rotors with the aluminum core, wears through the stainless outer bit, and then it just like becomes this, how do you describe, like molten aluminum, like pouring out of like the worn through spots, and it just becomes like horrific and everything is ruined. That occasionally happens when these sage pieces of advice Dave and I share with you weekly are overlooked or ignored. So
yeah, you leave rotor wear too long, the brake surface can detach from the arms in the most severe cases. But more importantly, you're overstretching the boundaries of what the pistons are designed to travel. You're basically forcing the pistons to travel too far
out.
And then you can
correctly.
And they don't retract. You can damage the calipers in doing that, and it can get pretty expensive if you ignore this kind of stuff. So definitely pay attention to the rotor thickness. In my experience on a road bike, I'd say you tend to get about 3 sets of pads out of a rotor, roughly, give or take.
Yeah, I would say fair, condition dependent maybe, but that's perfectly reasonable. I would say if you could replace your rotors once a year, if you ride a lot, that's probably a good idea. Kind of like preventive maintenance for drivetrain stuff, where you just sort of hit it at an interval and do some stuff, even if you don't really need it, so you never get to the point where you wish you had and didn't.
So minimum thickness, it's often printed on the rotor. Shimano, I can tell you off the top of my head, it starts at 1.8 millimeters. You're meant to replace it when it falls at 1.5 or below. We're not talking about a huge variance, which is why we're saying, you need a caliper that can measure within a 0.1 of a millimeter and do it from the center of the brake track, not from the top. So don't use vernier calipers. Brad, do you know off the top of your head what the most impressively worn rotor is that you've seen?
Well, the ones that I've seen are the Shimano type that I've described, I've seen them where they've worn like almost paper thin, too.
It gets flexy.
Bendy. Yeah, but it'd be on kind of like a beater bike where it was kind of almost expected that you would see like it might have even been like a really crappy e-bike that was both extremely heavy and probably dragging half the time anyway. But the ones on like what I would say a real bike, like a bike used for an enthusiast's use, not just like a random object that is neglected habitually, was definitely these Shimano Icetech rotors with their aluminum core, it's a great concept, but like so many great concepts, they require a little extra attention that not everybody is either made aware of at the beginning. Makes sense, but you may not expect that if you just bought a bike, it was equipped, and no one ever bothered to tell you, and you didn't really know. I feel like that happens somewhat frequently, that people buy bikes with features that they don't fully even know. And many of those features, especially at the higher end of bikes these days, have some very specific and unique tolerances and wear lives and things of that nature that perhaps by not knowing you might expose yourself to surprises that some of which we're describing now. But I've seen a few melted rotors in my day that where the aluminum part becomes the brake surface by accident, and then it by the way doesn't hold heat well. Aluminum, it's have you ever seen, Dave, too, when you get like a little piece, like a shard of aluminum in a rim brake, a rubber rim brake pad, like an old road bike might be a good example, where
for sure.
Then under heavy braking, it creates like a molten ball of aluminum that has melded from that scouring of just constant contact along the rim. Usually the rim shows the sign of it as well, but you'll get like a pebble-sized round melted glob of hardened aluminum like embedded in the. Those are the good old days. But anyway.
Yes.
We kind of.
Those days still exist for some people.
I know, exactly. I'm seeing what I'm seeing today.
Yeah.
So, but it's aluminum's not really a good brake material.
No. Molten aluminium on your disc brake is a time where your brakes terminator themselves.
Yeah, but was it Stan who did it? I think it was. God,
it was Stan's. Stan's did
aluminum rotors, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So light. Yeah.
That's it, though. Yeah.
I mean, if your bike's light enough, you don't need brakes.
True. If you only go up the hill,
it just doesn't carry its mass at that point. It just slows itself. So
yeah. True.
Science.
Okay.
All right. Should we move on to some final tech bites?
Yeah, sure.
I mean, there's, as I said at the front of the episode, it's Eurobike. There's a heap to cover. I'm ignoring most of it, so I'll just let's just talk about a few things that I guess caught my eye. And Brad, if you've got any that you feel you'd like to talk about, then please jump in. But Yeah, I guess, to start with some industry news out of Sweden, it sounds like Ohlins are taking a few steps to reduce its workforce by approximately 10%. But yeah, local Swedish paper article that was sent to me specifically calls out declining in demand in the mountain bike market as for the workforce reduction. So yeah, still something to confirm, still something to look into, but I guess it remains to be seen what this means for Ohlins' future investment in mountain bikes. But layoffs are never good, so hopefully the people involved there are landing on their feet. But,
were you able to determine whether that 10% was like across the board at Ohlins, or was it just among their mountain bike?
Haven't been able to confirm.
People.
They haven't really released that yet. So, but yeah, that's something to look into. But given mountain bike was specifically called out as the area of Ohlins that is not thriving, unfortunately, you'd have to assume some of those layoffs are related to that segment. So
it's kind of the newest segment for them. I mean, they made
in the scheme of things, for sure.
I was going to say, like, there may be a newer one that I don't know about, but like, it was very motorsport driven prior to their foray into mountain bikes, which kind of got kicked off of the OEM deal with Specialized. It was kind of their big break in. Obviously, they still sponsored the Gravity team, the Specialized downhill team, for example, like Bruni and Finales and all these kind of top names. They're still using those products, and so it is interesting. But if it's only the mountain bike line, it's a tough market to break into in the first place, given the decades of dominance by two key individual companies in particular. But they're still, I mean, even in the sort of third party realm, it's still a tough market among all the good options. But the stuff is good. And I think their products are actually very good. So
well, you'd hope so. I mean, they're kind of like the benchmark product from the motorcycle world of things.
Exactly.
And, they're one of the most desirable brands in that sphere and in that space. So I mean, if you look at them, they're a company of about 300 employees and globally known name, and if they're struggling to break into the mountain bike world, then it doesn't bode well for others trying to compete with Fox and RockShox.
Antitrust lawsuit incoming soon. Given what offerings are lately from those two brands, it's Ohlins doesn't really have anything that kind of compares at the high end. I mean, if it's very good quality stuff, don't get me wrong, but like in terms of what's getting all the press these days with Flight Attendant and Fox's kind of various attempts at a similar product, it seems like Ohlins is almost like kind of one generation behind the others in terms of the products they're offering. But anyway, we shall see what comes of all this.
Also, on the tech news side of things, Oneup recently released some new mountain bike hubs, which look pretty cool, actually. I mean, they're colorful anodized aluminum hub shells with 7 different colors available. So you can get your purple ano. But yeah, internally, they look quite interesting. They're kind of like I'm not going to say a copy, but they're definitely inspired by a DT Swiss 350 with the star ratchet design. But they're not the same. So the DT Swiss have long used like a steel ratchet rings internally. Oneup have decided to take the path of aluminium ratchet rings, which I think is potentially brave. I mean, they've definitely done their testing. I think the Oneup as a company have proven themselves at this point in the market to create some pretty great products. So I'll give them the benefit of the doubt at the moment, but who knows, 3 or 4 years from now, it'll be interesting to see how those wear. But yeah, I mean, it's price point wise, they cost $370 for a set of hubs, which compare that against about $420 for a set of DT 350 hubs. They are lighter than a DT 350. They're actually even lighter than a DT 240 as a hub set. They've got 44 points of engagement. They run in standard enduro bearings. I mean, there's a lot to like here. Brad, any thoughts?
So aluminum's been getting it's a tough week for aluminum on our podcast, Dave. I would say, unfortunately, my experience having raced or worked with teams who race on DT Swiss internal products for both teams, actually. Synchros Wheels also use a DT Swiss internal, particularly among the higher engagement, even on their steel rings, the star ratchet. I've seen a number of them from more powerful riders actually shred I think what basically starts as a little under power shred a little bit of the contact, and then the material that sort of gets either deformed or broken away sits between the two engaging contact surfaces, and then the contact is stepped out too far, and then they don't bite anymore. Then you basically like shred the ring to dust inside, and that's on steel rings that are the DT Swiss variant of this concept.
Probably the 54 tooth.
50 was it 54? I was going to say 54 or 6. I'm trying to do my math. Yes, exactly right. So we actually stepped it all back and got rid of all those high engagement rings for the ones a little bit more overlap and bite from the lower engagement options. So this ring 44 is fairly higher than the ones we were swapping for.
So I guess it's similar to DT Swiss. It's not the same. It's possible they've increased the diameter of the rings, which would give more bite. And that's something DT Swiss just did themselves. They released a mountain bike specific hub with a much, the DE 240 DEG, which has much larger rings in order to allow a much higher tooth count. So I think there are ways around that. But certainly DT Swiss had that issue with steel. And I'd say when you look at DT Swiss still, having some reliability issues out in the market, it's one of those things that, time will tell whether Oneup have been able to absolutely nail this and whether they can hold the quality control required to make the system work. But as I said,
all the other things are great. Price point, weights, color options. I mean, what more could you want?
It's J-bend only, 6-bolt only. I think it's boost only as well, which helps as far as the price point goes. They've got Enduro ABAC 5 bearings in the hubs, which personally I'd probably say ABAC 3 might have been the better choice, just purely based on having a more thicker grease and tighter seals with the ABAC 3 versus ABAC 5s. But time will tell, and they're standard bearings, so there's not a lot stopping you from just knocking them out and putting new ones in. So overall, I think this is a hub to watch.
There's a hub I was watching, cool free hub from KOM. We don't even know because we never heard of it. It's called the Xeno, Xeno. We kind of whatever, but like we heard of it. Pretty cool design. Never seen it before, where the actual engagement of the free hub occurs on the non-drive side. Although now we don't know what to call that side because it's being driven from the non-drive side. It's just a paradox in and of itself. But it basically would, I would assume it kind of works similar to, I think it distributes the load or the application of power and the sort of forces into the hub and subsequently into the ground, sort of more uniformly or more evenly. So I would expect it to improve wear life of things. Super fascinating design. It's just cool to see it kind of working.
It's kind of like an axle within an axle. So the free hub body is actually like this really big axle that goes all the way through to the opposite side of the hub where the free hub, pole system sits.
Yeah, it looks like the free hub body, like what the carrier for the cassette is like all one piece through the hub.
It is. It's like a torque tube all the way through. And the idea is, this is shown at Bespoke in Manchester because KOM's a UK-based company. And basically the idea is that they're basically saying that in a normal hub, the free hub body bearings are often the first to go because every time you're putting pressure into the pedals and the chains pulling on the cassette's kind of just like trying to pull the free hub body out of alignment in a sense.
Yeah, it's like a torsional force.
It's a torsional force on just two of the bearings, just in the free hub body. And what they're trying to do is, really spread those forces throughout the entire hub. So it's the free hub body is fully supported internally. It's interesting. I think manufacturing this thing is going to be more expensive, and I think there's other complications like with rotor placement and all that by having the mechanism on the left hand side. But it sounds like they've spent 10 years trying to create this thing, and there's a patent pending. And I don't know. I think we have seen some hubs with free hub body related issues, but I feel like there's enough hubs out there that are getting the durability pretty dialed that I don't know if this solves a big enough issue.
Yeah, I don't know that we need it, but I liked it.
Yeah.
I liked it.
It's cool. It's cool to see a rethink of this stuff. And
it makes sense now that they've mentioned it.
It makes sense. It looks like it requires a proprietary rotor though, in order to fit over the increased left-hand flange size. So that's not amazing. But hey, solve one problem, introduce another.
As long as it's not an aluminum rotor, I think we'll be okay. See how I tied it all in there? That was good.
I like it. Yeah. Good callback.
Thanks. Thank you.
A few more things to get through. We've got this is an unexpected one. I thought this was a typo when I read it last night. DJI, yes, the company that makes drones and little selfie sticks and also GoPro competitor cameras. They're making an e-bike motor, which is a sentence I didn't think I'd say, but yeah. So I mean, it seems to be a world beater as far as power to weight ratio. It's got 105 newton meters of torque, and it's in a package that's like half a kilogram lighter than a Bosch system. Yeah, they've debuted it exclusively on an Amflow PL trail bike, which is, I believe, also a new brand of e-bike. But this thing looks cool. It's got like a little touch screen.
The interface is awesome. The screen is slick, as you would expect from somebody who's been doing slick digital stuff.
For sure. I mean, they're the market leader in the drone space, and that is a huge consumer industry. And I guess, the crossover here is that their drones run on tiny little electric motors. So it makes, they do have experience downsizing little motors and making them fly. So, to put one between two wheels isn't too much of a stretch, but just very unexpected. But yeah, I guess another brand in the space, and it'll be interesting to see how quickly they can prove themselves. If the reliability is there, then I expect it won't be very long before we start seeing this motor on a lot of bikes.
I'm not a huge e-bike enthusiast, but the numbers compared to every other option that before I heard of this one seemed like they were probably the best out there. This wipes the floor with all these motors. I mean, it's like putting out 25% more torque and then
at less weight.
Less weight than the biggest kind of available motors, and like a specialized SL version of their motor. It's like about half the power or half the torque at least.
Yeah.
Of this and like 2/3 the power or something like that. So I mean, that's a big upgrade.
My hot take on this is that motors like this are sort of the future of the e-bike industry, whereas at the moment we've got these heavy full power options and then these lighter low power options, and where I think everything is going is to have a lighter full power option and just have that as the only e-bike. And I think DJI one of the first to get there, perhaps the first to get there as far as having that much power in this system. But yeah, I think that is where we'll go, and I realistically think you'll probably have it where basically just battery size is what really dictates how heavy the bike is. If you want your e-bike to take you into the mountains for 5 hours, and you'd have a heavy battery and therefore a heavy bike, and if you just want to go out for 2 hours, you'd have a lightweight battery. So
maybe it should be said too that I believe they're offering this. Am I correct that this motor comes with two battery options? It's like a small and a large capacity. Yeah. One that's obviously substantially lighter. So they actually account for that.
Yep. 800 watt hour and a 600 watt hour. Very interesting.
So e-bikes. Here we go.
Speaking of new bikes, Giant have just released the new Giant Revolt Advanced and Advanced Pro. Frame weight's unchanged at 990 grams claimed, but they've done that while introducing some heavier features, such as they've gone through you can now stash your inner tube and gummy bears inside the down tube, and there's no flappy hoses for easy maintenance anymore. Instead, you're going through the headset bearing like everything else.
They flap around inside the down tube.
Probably, yeah. And they've retained the 2-position dropout at the rear for adjustable chainstay position. You can fit up to a 700 by 50 mil tire in the back. And a feature I like, but remains to be seen whether they've nailed it, because I think the previous version had some sealing issues. And I know they did call out having fixed the seal now, but we'll see. But yeah, they run a proprietary seat post that is very flexible, and they've made that even more flexible, the defuse seat post, even more flexible in this new version. But what I like about the design is, even though it's using like a non-round seat post, they offer a shim system that allows you to put a round seat post in place. So you're not stuck using their seat post. You can fit a dropper post. You can fit a regular post as well. So think that's a pretty cool feature as long as it works as intended.
Most important question, given our history of mid-level gravel reviews and the future of that segment of the market, does it come equipped with a UDH trailer hanger?
I would have initially said, of course it does, Brad, but I actually don't think it does. And it looks like because of the flip chip at the rear chainstay, they have omitted UDH compatibility, which this
could lead to a revolt.
Well done.
I see what
you did there.
Yeah, that was good.
Nice. So not UDH compatible. This might be the first brand new gravel bike release we've seen, which is not UDH compatible. Bold choice.
Should take their cues from Bianchi. I knew we'd get to it this week. I knew we'd get to it.
You do love a good Bianchi callback. Yeah. So, there you go. I think that'll actually be a sticking point for that bike for a lot of people deciding on it. That's a bit of a bummer, but yeah, the rest of it looks really good. But for anyone that is paying attention to where SRAM is going with their gravel group sets, it does seem like that UDH will, in the near future, be an important feature if you want the latest and greatest wireless group set.
We promised you there would be warnings, and here's one. Don't buy a new gravel bike that's not equipped with a UDH.
Yeah, strong take, but I'm not going to disagree with it. Last on the list of new tech, do we want to discuss a bike that none of us are going to buy, and rather it's a bike that is often given as a charity exercise?
Of course we do.
Okay, so the Buffalo Bike, as part of the World Bicycle Relief, which is a really cool charity that basically tries to empower communities, predominantly in Africa, by giving them transport to, get kids to school or, set up businesses and carry stuff, or even if it's just, carrying water into communities. These bikes are pretty cool, and they're basically made, cheap, so they can afford to give them to these people, and then they're made to be easily serviced. So they basically train up mechanics in these small communities and employ them to service these bikes. It's a low cost machine, but Buffalo, they've just announced an update to the bike. So they've got a new version, the Utility S2. It looks a lot like the old one, but it's got a patent pending 2-chain, 2-speed drivetrain.
2 chains, people. 2 chains.
Double the chain. So
it's a horizontal slotted rear end dropout, like any single speed, not anyone, but conventional single speed dropout. Manages to tension both. So it's 2 different gear ratios. Obviously, it's a small chain ring. It appears the cog size is either the same or very, very close. But there's 2 individual cogs in the rear, and by some kickback motion, it essentially switches without a shifter or a cable from one driving cog to the other. And there's 2 chain rings in the front. One's large and one's very small.
I have the specifics for, given this is the Geek Warning podcast.
Lay it on me.
27 tooth small chain ring, 45 tooth big chain ring, and then the rear cogs. You're right, Brad. One's an 18 tooth, one's a 19 tooth. And then the chain for the smaller chain ring is 100 links long. The chain for the big chain ring is 110 links long. You're exactly right. You switch the gears by basically backpedaling, and then that disengages one and engages the other.
Yeah, I just am thrilled that someone spent the time to figure out 2 separate gear ratios that achieved the desired ratios and also had chains that could be tensioned together with one. You know what I mean?
They've found the magic gear. They've magic geared the bike.
Yes, they did. They magic geared the bike. Oh God, I never thought I'd see this. It's actually cool. I've seen these bikes. They are very cheap bikes. Fundamentally, this seems like a kind of a hard thing to do cheaply, but maybe it's so simple that it just can't really be screwed up like a coaster brake kind of, it's just like, it just kind of works. You just kind of kick it back. And it's not so precise, but it does the job. And man, it's a pretty cool thing. And it looks neat too.
Yeah. So I believe World Bicycle Relief was established by one of the co-founders of SRAM, and it's sort of their passion project and their full-time focus these days. and it is a not-for-profit and, really cool cause. And yeah, I think to design this, they did actually involve SRAM, Giant, and Trek, I believe, collaborated on the design and engineering of all this bike, which is really cool given it's not something they plan to sell. It really is a bike for communities that aren't necessarily paying for these things. So but that's some cool tech. The shifterless shifter.
Yeah. I mean, that almost was like the most interesting thing I saw all week long in a way.
Yeah.
It's like a bike that probably costs $100 or less. I mean, I don't even know. They're super low cost.
So
bikes,
I mean, we weren't really clear on it, but basically, 2 cogs in the rear, one sits idle, while the other one is engaged, and then you backpedal it, and then it basically switches. What the other one then sits idle, and the other one's engaged. So that's how you have why you have 2 chains and 2 speeds.
But it seems like, correct me if I'm wrong here, Dave, that while one is sitting idle, it's still spinning freely while you're pedaling because the 2 chain rings turn no matter what. Yep. Am I correct?
Yeah.
So it's like,
so. Yeah.
And the chains, each is connected to each cog. So it basically just disengages one and engages one cog, but both cogs are turning. One's just turning without engaging something, basically.
For sure. Yeah. So I think like I'm not a BMX expert. I'm not even an amateur, but the free coaster style hubs and BMX I think work a bit like this, where you kind of backpedal a bit and then it disengages the cog, so then you can just do sweet fakey tricks.
It's like a friction engagement.
Yeah, and I think this is working. I mean, I could be way off base here and need to do a corrections corner next week, but I think this is kind of working on a similar concept. But instead of then going to just coast in both directions, it rather then engages the opposite cog. So. But yeah, this is neat. So well done to World Bicycle Relief, and congrats on the new bike.
For sure. I was going to say it's also not the same as a 2-speed kickback hub, which is kind of similar fundamentally, but totally different in the execution. And of course, only requires one chain and one chain ring and one cog, and the rest is managed internally. But what a funky thing that never even thought of before, let alone seen. So that was cool surprise.
Yeah. Yeah. So well done to the team involved in that, and that that includes some of the engineers at SRAM, and we like it. And I guess to reiterate, like the design is meant to be just purely robust and easy to service, and needs to carry large amount of weight. So I think the rear rack is rated now to up to 100 kilograms, which is not a small amount of weight. So you can carry people on that and carry a whole lot of water. And I think I'll use this moment to just remind World Bicycle Relief, check it out and donate, because you can basically buy a bike for someone and change a community through the bike. So I think it's just a cool cause. Feels like a good place to wrap up.
Let's wrap it up. That was a good one, though. That's I was going to say too. World Bicycle Relief. I'm sure you can donate to it independently as a interested charitable person. So Google that if you like the sound of the cause, if you've never heard of it, or just Google it to look at this new bike. So it's pretty different, and it'll kind of make you scratch your head a little bit when you look and try to figure out what the mechanical setup is, given how things look. So it certainly brought a smile to my face and made me stop and think, a little bit more than some bikes do, even at the other end of the spectrum. So good job. Yeah. Good job, everybody.
You can definitely donate, and you can definitely buy one of these for someone else. There's different tiers. You can give us however much you want, but $22 gets you a wheel set for someone. $41 gets you the mechanics toolkit sent to a village in Africa, or you can buy one whole bicycle for $136. So I think there's some pretty low bar for a feel good moment, and to really make a difference to someone out there, or a whole community, as it may be. So anyway, head over worldbicyclerelief.org. Thank you, Brad. It's been great as always. Thanks for tuning in for Geek Warning. If you haven't already, please jump on to escapecollective.com. Check out all the tech coverage that we've got from this week and weeks past. There is a lot to see. And as a reminder, we have a promo at the moment for people that aren't yet members. You can join for this month for just $1. So head on over escapecollective.com/TDF, and that'll get you that promo. And from there on, you can decide whether you want to support what we do or...
Should we mention this is a 5 Wednesday month day? That means 5 Geek Warning episodes one more than usual.
I didn't know that.
$1. I mean, how many ways can we spin this to make this the deal of the century right now?
Yeah.
Anyway,
it's the deal of the century.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, head on over, do it, enjoy. You know, even if you just for this month just decide to take off work and just binge on all the member-only episodes, worth it. But hopefully you stick around longer than just that 1 month. But
you might even be able to do it while you're at work. Didn't hear it from me.
There you go, pro tip from Brad. All right, Brad, thank you very much. We'll see you again next week.
Yep, looking forward to it. Bye.